The topic of today's meeting or today's panel discussion is headphones, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Where are we? Where are we going? What's up with that? And I don't know why these guys want to sit so far away from me.
No, I didn't. I was going to come over there. Let's get scoot over.
So,
you'll see later why.
Let's scoot over once to Georgia.
The reason why I picked this topic is because I think headphones are incredibly immature. And I don't think they've come very far at all from where they will end up. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that and how far away we are from some great place where there really are a lot of good headphones out there. So we'll start with Michael Goodman from CEntrance. Michael builds a variety of headphone amplifier type products, the DAC port, DAC Mini, the new M8, which is a portable headphone amplifier, which is pretty cool. And so my question to you is, how many headphones do you find in your testing that sound good? And also, if sounding good means something at all, it means that they probably sound similar. And so, how many headphones do you hear that are similar sounding? That are
None.
None.
Should I elaborate?
Sure.
It's an awesome question, so thank you. It actually had me pause to think. I appreciate the opportunity. I would say that, in my experience, no two headphones sound the same. As a matter of fact, the more my level of appreciation of headphones grows, the fewer headphones I like. So one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that headphones actually each headphone has a character, just like a car. I have to pause for this.
Excuse us.
Nope. Each headphone has a character, and it is very much a personal preference which headphone you like. I've gravitated towards probably 2 or 3 models that I listen to.
Which ones?
I don't want to offend anybody.
No, that's my job.
Okay.
So you're under my cover.
So Biodynamic sounds good to me.
Which ones?
Biodynamic 880 and Biodynamic T.E.. Those two. You probably can think that, as you grow older, your high-end hearing starts to go. Biodynamic kind of props up the high frequencies a little bit, especially in the 880s. That's good. And then Audeze's. Obviously a very linear sounding headphone. I would say probably the headphones that have the least amount of character in my experience. And I would say that's a good thing, because most headphones actually have some sort of either frequency range or some characteristic that stands out, and after a while becomes fatiguing if you listen a lot. So that would be my response.
Thank you. That's my experience too, pretty much. I would say that neutrality, I think in the long run we're trying to find some neutral middle, and that there's plenty of room within this imaginary neutral middle for character that people can like or dislike as a general rule. So now that George is here, I can ask my opening question. So Sennheiser, to take probably what I would say is the best, most competent headphone engineering company in the world. If you spend some time listening to every product in the Sennheiser line, you would expect, if they're an engineering-driven company, and I'm stealing this from Steve Gutenberg a little bit, he likes to say this, but if you have somebody like Sennheiser making headphones, they should all sound relatively similar. But they don't. They're very different in some cases, and very, very different. And so the question is it because Sennheiser is a poor engineering company, or is it because making headphones is just plain hard? And I think that's an interesting part of this topic as well, is how hard is it to design a pair of headphones? How hard is it to design a pair of headphones? He's been trying to make a pair of headphones for quite a while now.
No, it's either really easy or really hard, depending upon whether you want to question everything on the face of the planet or not, which is more of a disease than anything else, you know. But first of all, there was a problem with these things. I hated them. You know, I always did. I couldn't stand them. And I just considered that they were offensive. You know, there must be some reason for it. And because someone had come to me to get me to make cables for them, I said, well, sure. It was Ultimate Ears at the time, and I said, sure, send me something to work with. And everything they sent me was like, God, I got to listen to the shit to design cables. So I went, no, I'm just going to go play this direction. And you end up confronting the belief system of the entire world if you try and go against established principles, which was fine by me, all right? One of the first things you came up with this, for instance, was the measurement system. The measurement system was wrong, okay? And very definably, and in the end, it was very, very simple to understand why it was wrong, and it was very easy to correct, all right? So roll back a couple of years, I'm trying to make these things, and the measurements are this and that, and the other thing is kind of like, oh, God. You know, like, it makes some sense, and geez, it's nice for matching one to the other, and so on. Geez, I kind of like things that are a little like this, but maybe not, and one thing or another, you know. And then, so I said, I'm going to forget everything for a while and start over again. Well, what I discovered after a very long process was that the way they were measuring it is everybody decided styrofoam heads were the standard. And they have a little tube, and then what the tube was, well, it's got to be this tube or that tube, whatever. And so they put it in a sealed tube, and then they measured it so that it was flat. Okay, that's it, we got it, you know. Bullshit. That is so wrong. Because what happens is, in a conventional, if you're measuring a loudspeaker, that you measure a pressure wave that's coming through the room. It's never a sealed tube, all right? As soon as you put it in a sealed tube, what happens is this. You have an area and a compliance relationship between the driver here and your eardrum. And there's only one way that you can resolve that dilemma. A, the pistonic motion of this driver has to more or less match an eardrum. You can't make it very much bigger or very much smaller, or it's just not ever going to work right, okay? Next, when you measure it, the thing you're measuring with, the diameter of it and its compliance has to match this, because it's a sealed tube. In other words, if the area of this was 2 and the area of this is 1, when this moved 2, this would move 1. When this moved 2, this would move 4. Okay? So that factor came in very heavily, because the B&K microphone that everybody was like, oh, well, we got to use B&K. Sure, they're linear out in an open room, but you put them in a sealed tube, and their linearity depends upon the piston that's pushing them. So we developed a measurement system where we matched the driver to the earphone and took the tube out of the equation. And now our graphs look like what we're hearing. Okay, now, at which point it was like, whoa, that's it, that's obvious. Now, do you think you could go to a manufacturer and convince them of that? No. You went to the manufacturer, what you got was, well, I said, if you're going in the earphone business, what would you do? Well, we would use this curve. And I'm going, why? Well, people like a lot of bass. I'm going, no, they don't. People like it right. Your measuring system is crud.
It's nice bass.
So you ended up confronting this type of situation. Everything you did kind of went against the grain. I mean, the materials they use for the driver parts and stuff like that, bad choice. I mean, because all of their criteria was based on amplitude, you know, how efficient it was and so on. And kind of that's okay, and a lot of times that works. And actually the overall efficiency of the system is important that way. But what we discovered was this, that there was an inverse problem because of the scaling of small drivers. It probably comes in with headphones too. If you have a large driver, am I talking to you?
No.
Okay. No, well, we have.
Believe me, I'll stop you.
So somebody throws something. Okay, if you have a large driver, all right, and you have a pole piece in it. So all drivers are basically a magnet and a pole piece and a frame, which is like a yoke. Okay. And the planer guys skate this a little bit, but nonetheless, I mean, this is the basic configuration you're going to come up with. Now, in a big driver, say a woofer or something like that, and they use iron for the pole pieces. Well, there's a real interesting thing here, that the skin effect, which, did I say that? Okay. Skin effect in copper or something is like thousands of inches. Skin effect in iron is huge. It's 60 cycles. It's 20 thousandths of an inch. It's crazy. So, because it's permeable and conductive. So what happens is, in a big driver, so what? We don't worry too much about the involvement of the pole above a certain frequency because the skin effect blocks it out. In these, the little parts are 20 thousandths thick or 30 thousandths thick. So now you have this huge lack of linearity in the equation. And on top of that, you've got something called eddy currents that get generated in these pole pieces. All right, so I went on all different types of materials. We even got to the point where we actually made our own metal in these things, trying to come up with a metal that had a very high internal resistance, you know, to get rid of the eddy current, and yet was permeable and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, everything we knew got turned inside out.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, George. So the question was,
yes, it was hard.
Is making a headphone easy? And the answer is no, it's not easy at all. George said something about when you measure speakers, you have free space that you can measure the acoustic wave in, and the acoustic wave is propagating through free space. Well, inside an earphone, that's not really the case. Inside an earphone, let's see, 1,000 feet per second, and this is 2 inches maximum, so that's, I don't know, what is it, 5 kilohertz or 3 kilohertz. Anything below 3 kilohertz is not propagating in there, really. It's being coupled, and that coupling creates a situation where you've got various impedances to match as it goes through the system of bouncing off the outside of the ear and then into the ear canal and stuff like that. So it's very, very complicated system, actually, what's inside a headphone. A lot of people don't know this, but even the headphone pad is important.
Huge. Huge.
Alex, how important is a headphone pad?
I mean, we spent almost a year perfecting that pad. It was just back and forth to shop, getting those pads made, the angle of the pad, the density of the foam within the pad, the leather of the pad, even the differences between using an Alcantara non-leather substance compared to the leather made a huge difference. We just started offering it with the LCD3, but we felt even just having that non-leather, the lack of the seal around the ear had a huge impact on the sound. So
yeah,
even the materials used in those pads make huge differences.
Right. Yeah.
Sort of close equivalency, not exactly the same thing. One of the biggest things that turned out to be a really critical element in the end is these guys. Every one of these sounds different.
Yep.
You know, and sometimes quite dramatically different.
Yep.
There's a third thing that comes into the equation that's also kind of parallel to the subject matter here. That when music or recorded material is mixed, the person mixing it may or may not be conscious of what's going on below about 80 cycles or something, because the speakers he listens to at such and such a distance to his monitoring. A notable thing where it becomes a very big problem with these is books on tape. They're using these things with the guys going like this. You know, well, that sounds cool. But it also runs down really low, so the very low frequencies could have a big bump in them, and it'll transmit just fine. So the only solution we came up with in the end was to have 2 sets of these. And basically we took one set, put a vent hole in it so that it acted more like a loudspeaker than a direct coupled system. And you give up something in doing that, but anyway.
Yeah, Etymotic, sends you the different ends. And I noticed that they sound different, drastically different, each end.
And how far you insert it in your ear makes a big difference where the resonant peaks and valleys occur in the frequency response. So, Michael, you are, well, I don't know, you're a flibbertigibbet, you're all over the place making all sorts of comments, and you see lots and lots of things. Do you see any stable metric of quality, even a subjective one, as far as you're concerned, when looking at headphones?
You mean in terms of a specific line that I view as quality, or a certain type, or?
Anybody zeroing in on it anywhere?
Okay. Well, I guess maybe I should start with my 2 references that I think are my #1 reference is the Audeze LCD3, and I think not only because, and again, I follow Steve Gutenberg in this philosophy, he and I are very much alike in that I don't necessarily believe in accuracy, because having worked, you know, in the record label business for many years for a producer, you know, I know that I can never know if something's accurate or not. I wasn't there, I wasn't in the studio, I don't know what mics they used, I don't know what console they used. So for me, what a headphone needs to do is completely engross me in the music, is connect me to the music. I mean, just like a great hi-fi system to me sounds like no hi-fi system. I want to close my eyes and have musicians in a room with me, nothing in between.
And what percentage of headphones that you listen to do you
percentage?
Yeah.
Maybe 0.2, because there are only 2 so far that do that for me. And it's the Audeze LCD3 and the Sennheiser HD800. But I'll tell you something interesting, if I may. I was listening a few weeks ago on the HD800. And I was listening to some music. I was pretty somber. Mogwai's latest string album called La Revenance. And just very emotive piece of music. And it hit me so hard, I started to tear up like a 5-year-old, right? And my wife comes into my office, honey, what's wrong? You know, this is amazing. This is amazing. You freak. I said, no, you don't get it. Like, I'm really experiencing the music through this. And she said, okay, we'll try the Audeze. I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think I can take it, you know? So I put the LCD3 in, and it was a whole nother level of not only the emotional connection, which to me is the most important part. I don't care if it's a headphone, a loudspeaker, or whatever transducer it is, as long as it strips everything between me and the music. And what the LCD3 did, and that the HD800 didn't do, is it really connected me to the soul of the whole of the music. Meaning, the HD800, as you know, has got so much air and so much definition and all those wonderful things that we all love. But to me, an LCD3 nails what is most important to me better than any, which is the soul of the music. And I know now why engineers, Grammy Award-winning engineers like Frank Filippetti mixes with them. I mean, that's a pretty heavy thing when you got a guy who's been producing records for 40 years and he trusts you know, that what he's going to hear on that headphone is what's on his mix. And I think that that's directly related to what I experienced. So it's rare that headphones do that for me. So
and what measure of hope do you have that they're going to get better?
Oh, I don't only have hope, I have complete faith, because there's some pretty exciting stuff coming on the horizon, and I know that there are going to be more headphones made by not only the companies that are established, but there are going to be companies well established like Audeze, maybe Hi-Fi Man, that are going to keep pushing this envelope. Like you, as blown away as I am, and I come from the high-end audio world. I mean, I came up working for Harry Pearson at the Absolute Sound, and he can't believe I keep talking about headphones, you know? But the truth is, it's new territory, and it just strips everything away. So I think that these guys are going to figure out, I think it's in its infancy. You had the best word when we were talking this morning, that this is really in its infancy.
I have to say, I think it's beyond infancy in the grade school, because Dr. Dre is at least a grade school entity. Because, you know, grade school kids
He is classically trained.
Ted, how you doing, man? Grade school kids can throw stuff around, you know, and generally make a mess.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So, an infant wouldn't be able to screw things up that bad.
Though we do have to debate for bringing headphones, you know, better quality. I don't want to say they're better quality, but I do think that Beats by Dre, as Andy said when he was here last year,
He's great.
you know, that if it wasn't for them, many of us wouldn't be here. But you're right. You know, when I have friends come over with a pair of Beats and I play them a Sennheiser HD25 1.2, and they look at me and go, "Oh, this thing's got to be $1,000." I said, "Oh, really? Go sell your Beats and go buy this pair of headphones, because guess what? You'll have extra money."
So I want to talk for a minute about this idea that we're in the infancy right now, and that there is hope for the future, that things will likely get better. A good example is George here, working on it, working his heart out. And how long have you been working on that?
4 years.
4 years. Okay, so that's how hard it is to make a pair of headphones. You've been working on Audeze headphones for
almost 5 years now.
5 years. I don't know about George because he's just getting these out, but I know that you have more ideas. Now I know that you can't really talk a lot about it, but do you see a closed off sort of single track narrow thing of tweaking your way into the future, or do you see something more dramatic than that?
I would like to somehow associate certain characteristics to different designs that we have. So kind of mood settings for what type of music you listen to, but also just pushing the envelope as far as we can with the materials we use. I mean, that's really going to give us the performance, that and the enclosures, basically.
For those of you that don't know, does anybody here not know about Audeze headphones and planar magnetic headphones? Anybody not know about planar magnetic headphones? Okay, I'll give you a quick thing. It's kind of like electrostatic speakers. They hate it when you start off that way, but it is kind of like that. It's a mylar diaphragm with a trace put onto the diaphragm that's immersed in a magnetic field. When you run current through the trace, it moves the diaphragm back and forth. So it's not a voice coil dome driver like a normal headphone is.
And the thinner you get that material, the mylar material, the faster the driver can actually move, which then leads to better performance.
And here's a strange thing. Planar magnetic headphones have been around for a long, long time. We got any head-fi people in here who know when the Yamaha orthodynamic, it's in the 60s, is it?
More?
60s or 70s?
He wasn't born
So
The scary thing is they know.
Late 70s.
late 70s? Okay, so planar magnetic headphones have been around since the late 70s, so 80. 30 years or something like that, and it just sort of disappeared. It has its issues. It's not inexpensive to do it that way, but
It's very expensive.
So much.
yeah. So that's another part. My observation of the world a lot of times is that if you're on the bleeding edge, you're a long way from the cutting edge. Okay, because on the bleeding edge, you're going to have people dying off, and so you have this technology, planar magnetic headphones, a long time ago. Way ahead of its time, so to speak, because there weren't the materials to deal with, and then they just died off, you know. And now there's a resurgence of it with Audeze and Hi-Fi Man both making competitive.
Fostex is doing very well.
Fostex, well, the T50RP is a holdover. It still is essentially the same headphone that they built back in the day, way back in the day.
Okay. I think that a big driver here is material science, that these in the 60s would not have been possible. Similarly, because many of the earphone things you see today and the quality of the Yamaha you spoke of and stuff like that, they were dealing with ceramic magnets.
Yeah, magnet.
You know, they had the magnets of, oh my God, how much they've changed is enormous, which took something that would have been technically impossible 10 years ago or 15 years ago and made it like maybe the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
You know, so similarly, some of the diaphragm materials, if you look at biocellulose or PIN, or, I mean, there's all these cool diaphragm materials out there. Now, you may not today be able to get them exactly the way you want them. I mean, I know that we basically had to make our own diaphragm materials because you could get the material, but you couldn't get it in the thickness you wanted, so you end up having to stretch it and so on. But the whole thing's materials, just everything.
The pads are protein leather. Is that what you're using? Is it a protein leather pad?
I don't know what protein leather is.
Protein leather. Protein leather, in case you don't know, because it's cool stuff. Okay, it feels, and I'm sure you've seen it in automotive seats, but it's made of eggshells.
What's it taste like?
Sulfur.
I was just gonna say.
Tastes like chicken. Feels like cow. Tastes like chicken. No, protein leather didn't exist 10 years ago, I don't think. So that's a whole nother technology right there. All right.
We call it the vegan version.
The vegan.
I was gonna say that's my favorite term. From people often ask me what my version is. I say it's the vegan.
Well, these California hipsters, you know, us people from Montana, we just like to throw it right down the middle.
Protein.
So I'm going to wax poetic for just a second about this subject of headphones getting better. And I'm going to mention somebody in our audience here, Sean Olive. Sean, raise your hand up. Sean is doing work over at Harman right now. And they are doing a lot of subjective evaluation, I should say sort of objective, subjective evaluation of the sound of headphones. And a moment ago I mentioned that headphones are couplers, and there's some very complicated things that I'll try to make very simple. But basically, if you put a calibrated microphone out in space and play pink noise, flat frequency response noise, and put the calibrated microphone out there, you'll get a flat line. But if you put your head in that field and look at the sound, by the time it gets to your eardrum, it is no longer flat. And it's because your body and your chest and your head provide a small amount of gain at low frequencies, so you get a little bump at certain frequencies. And you also get some gain from the concha ridge, which is this bowl ridge in your ear. Okay? And so by the time the sound gets to your eardrum, you've got a frequency response that rises at about 3 kilohertz or so, up to about 8 or 9 kilohertz, and then it'll fall off again. The problem is, in the past, in all the research papers on headphones forever and ever on, man, they talk about being diffuse field equalized. People here know the difference between diffuse field and free field? Have you ever talked about that stuff? Okay, so a free field calibration is in an anechoic chamber with no resonances. You put a sound source directly in front of the head, and then you map what it sounds like at the ear. But of course, speakers are off to the side of your head, so that's not right. And diffuse field is if you put yourself in a concrete room and pump it up with a bunch of speakers so the sound is coming from all directions at the same time, a diffuse field, then you measure what's at the eardrum. Then you've got that transfer function. But of course, that's not what a speaker's like either. And forever and ever, amen, when I first got my measurement head, I went, I want to see the curve from a pair of speakers, because after all, that's what we listen to when we listen to music. We listen to a pair of speakers. It was engineered on a pair of speakers. It was for a pair of speakers. Unless it's surround sound, okay, fair enough. But it's 2 speakers in a room. And I said, that's the curve I want. Lo and behold, in the research that Sean Olive is doing, also the research that Paul Barton is doing up at the National Research Council in Canada, they're coming to the conclusion that headphones should sound like a speaker in a room. Now, doesn't that just make sense?
No, but I'll tell you, the LCD3 was the only headphone that, when I first heard it, I almost couldn't wrap my brain around it because, you know, having been a DJ for so many years, the headphone was a way for me to cue up a record, so it'd be isolating me. It was a tool. And when I put on the LCD3s, it was the first headphone that wasn't all in here, but it actually created a sound field around me, and I know it's because they're open back. But sometimes it'll be late at night, I'll be riding, and I'll be listening to the LCD3, and I'll literally turn around to see my system, because my system in my office is right here, and I'll be like, did I leave the system?
But is it because they're open back, or is it because it's a plane wave?
No, because they move waves around the room, right?
Well, unfortunately, it's an illusion of sorts. Okay, but in order to qualify for the illusion, you got to be pretty close to reality. The problem comes in here is with this diffuse thing. All right. So if your criteria is some type of a linear response amplitude-wise, well, you're so out left field it doesn't make any difference. But you're probably an engineer. So, but what you really want is the harmonic structure to be integrated. It makes so much difference. In other words, it's just like really important. And any hysteresis in the system or anything that's carrying over or lagging or tends to erase that, as a diffuse field would. All right, so you get cancellation. All right, the spatial thing and the harmonic thing and the emotional thing are all dependent upon the upper harmonic structure resolving in such, and ideally being able to carry low male voice region and down. It's almost an unachievable goal. It's very, very difficult. You just do it very well. He was talking about speakers. Sennheiser 800s are a logical reference, a really good one, and I would say really close to what, you know, what I would say. But the Orpheus. Have you ever listened to Sennheiser? Anybody ever listen to a pair of Sennheiser Orpheus?
Yeah.
You know?
They sound pretty good.
Well, they get that part right. They don't really connect all the way down, but they get the overtone thing really right, so they've got that feel and that spatial quality to them.
Tyll, I do have a question. You're saying that good headphones should emulate a pair of speakers in the room. Which speakers?
A neutral reference.
Like what?
A neutral reference.
No, they should sound like, I'll tell you what they should sound like. They should sound like...
My objectivist pants are always hard to wear.
Genelex.
No, well, yeah, close. The little Genelec power. No, what's Jeff Joseph? Proton, what's Jeff's little speaker?
Yeah.
Arbits?
Jeff's.
Oh, Jeff Joseph.
Pulsars. They should sound like pulsars. There's no three-way speaker or five-way speaker or six-way speaker that's quite going to get a very, very good little two-way, like he said, a Genelec or a Pulsar is, to me, I mean, that's a realistic expectation.
So, as you can see, there's a whole lot of agreement upon what is exactly right.
I think we can agree on that. Yeah, I think there is a whole lot.
There is a lot.
Do you disagree?
No.
Disagree.
So I'm going to just throw it open to the audience here. If anybody's got a question, what time is it anyway? How far are we away from?
We got 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay. So questions? Yes.
Yeah, I was just curious about what you said about headphones should sound like speakers, because in order to do that, you would have to introduce like crossfeed and stuff, right? Because obviously you got total left isolation, right isolation, and you're not going to get any of the crossfeed. So, I don't know, would that be a direction that you think people would, would enjoy their headphones stuff?
There certainly is the opportunity to correct spatial information on headphones. You're basically not going to do it without the electronics have to do it, but
Quick.
yeah.
Okay. That's got to do with the way it was originally recorded, if nothing else. Okay. And I did that Ben Harper recording years and years ago. All right, and it was done with something that mimicked a head, which binaural they call it. Binaural. So if it's recorded that way, you'd be surprised at how good the spatial qualities are.
Absolutely.
If it's not recorded that way, in other words, if it's recorded even coincident, because that 8 inches makes a difference.
Yeah.
Okay, and that little bit of crossfeed that's in there. So I think it's maybe you'll see more recordings in the end that will be optimal. I never told any. This is secret. I never told anybody that that's the way it was recorded. But if you listen to it on a stereo system, it's like, it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Even though it was very equivalent to almost like coincident mono, which wouldn't work. But, I mean, but anyway, so I think it's the recording.
Having measured a lot of headphones, I can tell you that just even getting tonality in the ballpark doesn't happen very much. Yeah.
So we talk a lot about headphones, but we got a guy on the panel here that designs headphone amplifiers.
Yeah.
So you guys are all talking about headphones as if the reference for the amplification behind them is the same.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm sorry.
Obviously
We
it's
misled
not.
you there. No, it's not.
Right. So you guys are all quite happy to mention your favorite headphones, but have we thought about mentioning our favorite headphone amplifiers?
Well, we didn't do a lot of mentioning of our favorite headphones, but
I'd be willing to, but look, I learned from my mentor, Harry Pearson, who taught me that, first of all, there's no such thing as the word best in audio, because we're all listening to an art form, whether it's played through our stereos or we go to listen to live music, it's all subjective. That said, that's why I say in my reviews, I've had people write to me after a review and say, I read your review and I'm going to buy this piece. And I said, wait a minute, before you buy it, listen to it with your own ears. That said, I have different favorite headphone amps for different reasons. So I don't necessarily have a couple of favorites, but for the LCD3, for me, it's the EAR HP4 tube headphone amp. For the Sennheisers, it's actually the Burson Conductor at the moment. And for portability and to have tube portability, it's the ALO Pan Am or the ALO International. So what I'm saying is, depending on what I'm doing, like if I'm traveling to my house up north, you know, I'll bring my smaller headphone amp. I'm not going to tug along my EAR, you know, I can't afford to fix that thing. So it really depends, and it also depends on what type of mood I'm in. I have headphone amps that might be a little lean, so
For those of us that aren't going to buy 8 headphone amps, but rather 1, that would be more interesting, right?
I'd say, you know, CEntrance, ALO, and shit audio.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about Head-Fi is being able to try out the different components. I mean, it's kind of what I think sets it apart from hi-fi 2-channel systems is those components are very expensive, at least in my opinion. And you can figure out what you like, what characteristic you like within a component, and it makes it a lot easier being with headphones that are a lot less expensive.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
Okay. It's one thing that's a kind of a curveball here is the impedance on these things can run from under 16 ohms, 8 ohms, whatever, to 3,000 ohms. It's absolutely crazy impedance swings. So you kind of have to say what are you plugging into what amplifier. Now, for instance, if I was using this as a device, I would not use one of his headphones, you know, as a reference. I mean, just because it kind of runs out of gas, you know.
Yeah, right. That's huge, George, because like for you know, I listen to my V-Modas. I don't listen to my Audeces on my iPhone unless I'm using an iDevice DAC and headphone amp, which is a whole other ball of wax.
But what the amp he recommended is a good selection of amps with broad tolerance, you know. But that doesn't say that these little single-ended amps might not be really good on a pair of Sennheiser 800, say, or something like that was high impedance. So,
can I see your amp? Yeah. So, I like this amp. I do like this amp. I haven't spent a lot of time with one, but I like this amp. But I'm going to make a couple of points. First of all, the amp is the least important thing. Okay, the most important.
Excuse me.
I knew this would get a rise out of him, and that's why I took the amp ahead of time. Right. The amp is the least important part, and the reason why is because the source is very important, that you've got a good clean signal to start with. And as we heard earlier, the headphones are all over the place. So it takes a lot of effort to find a pair of headphones that you really, really like, okay? And then you can get an amp. Now, amplifiers are tubes, right? It's supposed to be goes in, goes out, just gain of power, and other than that, it's just a straight wire, fundamentally. But there's some very interesting things about this amp that have to do with what you can do with it and how you can configure it and why that's important for headphones. For starters, you got balanced and unbalanced outputs, so yeah, you can with an iPhone drive your balanced LCD3s with this portable headphone amplifier. So that's a big thing right off the bat. It's got a selectable output impedance, and that's important as well, okay, because some headphones, a 600 ohm headphone, you can run the output impedance up a little bit and it's fine. And then if you've got a balanced armature headphone with very low output impedances, you can change the output impedance. And another switch he has in there, and that I don't know anybody who does that, but the treble boost. Okay, there's a little switch to boost the treble on this thing. Most headphones that I measure above 20 kilohertz fall off in frequency response significantly or have issues. The point is that it varies a lot. And so this amp has a treble boost that about 10K up.
Well, the curves are sophisticated. They come from years of research in recording studio, years of work in recording studio. But yes, basically it is a shelf, 10 and up.
Yeah. So this amp, in terms of its performance as an amplifier, would be difficult to differentiate from any competent solid-state portable headphone amplifier in terms of its competence as a headphone amplifier. But because it has a lot of special features, and because headphones are their own little beast, Michael has figured out, okay, these switches may be necessary on a headphone amp, but there's also a bass boost switch and a couple other things. So looking at the features of a headphone amplifier is almost as important as looking at its characteristics as a straight up headphone amplifier.
That's the CEntrance Hi-Fi mate, by the way.
Hi-Fi M8 mate.
A couple of things I just wanted to add, and thank you, Tyll, for your inquisitive nature. I really appreciate that the way you look at things, because you look at things critically, and you look inside. As far as I'm concerned, having worked in recording studios for years and having designed audio equipment for many, many years, the choices that you make as an engineer are sometimes very difficult because you don't really know who to satisfy. When you look at this philosophically, you can say that this is probably a piece of art as much as it is a piece of technology. Why? Which painting should I buy? Should I buy a Picasso or should I buy, one of the modern guys? It's what you like. Same with an amp. Each amp has a sound. Each amp has a character, and tube amps obviously have more character than transistor amps. We have tried different combinations, and we've come to the conclusion that our company philosophy, if you can say it that way, is that we actually don't want to have an amp out there that has a color. We want to have a colorless amp. So that our amp is actually out of the picture as much as possible. So that things like music, things like headphones, to the extent that they do or do not add color, become the choices for the consumer, right? So our amp is actually not adding any color. However, we understand that there's a plethora of headphones out there, and this amp was designed to drive pretty much anything under the sun, both balanced and unbalanced. And we've realized after listening to a whole bunch of different headphones that they come with different impedance, they come with different bass characteristic, different treble characteristic, and in order to satisfy a really wide variety of users, we might want to include some tone shaping controls, we might want to include some impedance controls and gain settings, so that we actually give people a variety of options when it comes to the right sound. And the other thing I want to say about this real briefly is that this product is quite unique because it was crowdsourced. We
credit you for that, because honestly, you're a trailblazer. Because what Michael did, I was working for him when we came up with this, is he had the brilliant idea to go to his users, because he already has a dedicated ton of users, and he said, not only do I want to get their input, but he has written a personal blog, and I'm so proud of you for keeping this up, that has brought the users along the way, every step of the way, right down to his chip selections, right down to whether should we tone shape it, right down to should we do this XLR type or this XLR type. And that is huge, because that's something also that personal audio as a community does, that the high-end audio industry hasn't, which is, for a long time, and I know I was a younger guy in an older guy's industry, but we were telling the consumer what we thought was best. What he's doing is going to the consumer and looking at this whole kind of pool of opinions and saying, how do I please my consumers? It's like permission marketing. And that's really the future of where I think this hobby is going. I mean, look at the success of Headphone.
Anybody in here not aware of Head-Fi? Anybody in here not aware? Everybody's aware of Head-Fi. Yeah.
Oh, so no.
I want to piggyback on that. So that's a very interesting, well-considered amplifier, portable headphone amplifier right there. That the M8 mate.
I want this.
You too. Now, for a completely different alternative, okay, this is the V-Moda Vamp, or Versa, okay? This is a Samsung Galaxy S1 USB digital out into the Vamp Versa. And one of the things you'll notice about this, if you know anything about portable audiophile systems on Head-Fi, is there's no rubber bands. Okay, and this case slides off like this. Okay, you can still take a picture with your phone, and there's aluminum backs that can slide in here that then you can just walk around with your phone. And the truly amazing thing is right here.
They do still sell rubber bands, however. They
That
don't
goes
have a
into my
Samsung
pocket.
Galaxy 3 or an iPhone 5.
A little trouble.
Hey, that's the first time I've ever seen a serious portable digital headphone amplifier system that you can, without any trouble, just slip in your pocket. Because usually the rubber bands would stop it from going into your pocket.
Oh, the T.H.E. one does a great job, but it's just straps. They're strap systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the point is, on headphone amplifiers, there's a lot more than the amplifier itself. It's a lot about how you use it. And that's another thing about headphones. Far more than regular high-end stereo speaker-based systems is that they're application specific. What kind of headphones should I buy? What do you want to do?
Elaborate on that here?
Which one?
On the relationship of the amplifier to the device.
Sure, if you want.
Okay.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, real quick.
You got 2.
What we came down to on these things was really curious. We go, what impedance do you make? So we tried 12, 16, 24, 32, 45, 50, and we're going through all these different impedance, and somewhere in the process we're going, oh, okay, we get it. So here's what's going on. There is no such thing as a one-way driver. All right, that most drivers have 2 poles of action, okay? One of which is the pistonic area of the thing. It can go to the acceleration that can be tolerated by it, and it kind of starts giving up on you. However, the coil portion of the driver, it can accelerate as fast as the motor can drive it, all right? So you end up with basically a 2-way loudspeaker. Now, as you drop down impedance, what happens is that the lower impedance can draw more current out of the amplifier, so it appears at first jerk, well, you got more bass, you know, or whatever the case may be. And similarly, amplifiers that have a lot of transient information tend to be able to boost the treble a little bit. And that relates to the response of the amplifier to the impedance curves here, and I'll stop talking.
I will say that there is a trend in headphone amplifiers right now that is going to appear. That's my job as a journalist, to tell you when there's a trend when there really isn't one. And that trend is current amplifiers, transconductance amplifier. Anybody doesn't know what a transconductance amplifier is? We got a few of them. Okay, transconductance amplifier means you put a voltage signal in and it outputs a current signal.